I thought I would say a few words tonight about temples. This June we'll be doing these ceremonies, and a bunch of people will be coming from all over the world. And it connects to the idea of a temple. But I want to make sure we don't misunderstand what that is. If we go back to the time of the Buddha, there were no temples. Monks wandered freely throughout India. And then during the monsoon season, during the rainy season, they would gather for what we call the Ango. They would come together for about 3 months in one place. There weren't buildings, it wasn't like that. It was more like they would gather in a park, some tracts of land that were offered up by a wealthy patron or a local ruler, someone who just wanted to support the practice. They would say, you can have this space and you can gather and you can put up your tents or your shelters. You can practice together and try to stay dry. One year they would gather in one place and one year they would gather in another. But there come to be kind of centers of gravity, places where the Buddha would go every year, where monks would gather every year. And it's my understanding that it was kind of as simple as that, that what was a tent one year became a kind of simple structure the next year and became a more solid structure the next year. And one day we have temples. And something shifts because in the beginning there's a community of monks. And the practice space is defined simply by them being there. And wherever they go, that's that. That's the space. And so it's like the temple followed them. Then eventually we build something, they would build something, and then it's like the temple would go to that place. It becomes a kind of center of gravity. And people understand it, even from a distance. They look at it and they say, I know what that's for. I imagine that it was a very organic development. We can look back now and we can say maybe something was lost and something was gained. But I don't think any of it was really on purpose. One day there were just temples. And those buildings became important. And the idea of space became important. And the idea of inviting someone in became important. There's a lot of kind of poetic language around the idea of a temple. Dogen once said you need 3 people to make a monastery. He also one time stuck a blade of grass in the ground and said, there's a temple. But on a simpler level, we kind of recognize them. I've been to a lot. There's an experience of a temple, I think. You know, if you're in a big city in Japan and you're walking past stores and past houses, and suddenly you come across a temple, you understand that something is different. Not only because it's different in function, but you sense, probably correctly, most times correctly, that this has been here for a long time. The trees are bigger. The space is different. It has a different air. Temples arise in India, all over Asia, in Japan, and then we come here. And so I wanted to talk about the history of this place because it's not that different. When we first started gathering, and there are people here who were part of this, I think we were a lot like Buddha's group of monks. We rented a space on Quinpool, later we rented a place on Spring Garden. And we would gather, and there was a roof and there were four walls, but we kind of understood we're a community of people. We're not a space, we're people in a space. And we would recreate that space whenever we would show up, and we would make it what we needed to be. And it was really wonderful. It was a really beautiful way of being. And then COVID happened. And if we're not careful, we can miss something really important. This building was finished about 2 years ago. And about a year and a half ago, we had these opening ceremonies, and we kind of said, this is the founding of Sensoji. And in a sense, that's true. This place that has this name and these walls. But when I think about it, and I think, when did we really build a temple? I think it was at the beginning of COVID. It was when we started practicing on Zoom. And it became, for the first time in my mind, a space that people enter. And it started with a Zoom account. But suddenly every day we would tune in, we would turn on our computers or our phones. And even though we were in all these different places, different parts of the world, different time zones, we were coming together into a place that we understood as always being there. And for me, at least, it started to feel less like we were making it each time, and more like it was something we were visiting. So I think in many ways, the temple's founding starts there with Zoom, which is kind of weird. There's an experience that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where if you're in an airport, when you pull up to the airport, you understand I'm in this airport, right? The taxi drops you off, or your friend drops you off, and you look at the big sign and you think, okay, this is LaGuardia. This is Halifax. This is, a couple weeks ago, I was at Indianapolis. I say, oh, this is what the Indianapolis airport looks like. And you get out, you get your bags, and you go inside. And then once you're inside, very quickly, it doesn't feel like I'm at this airport. It doesn't feel like I'm in LaGuardia. It feels like I'm in the airport, because there's one airport. There's one airport that exists in all these different places. And it's not just because usually I'll joke about this as if it's a negative, right? As if you're kind of entering into this weird, unreal world. But the reality is that you're entering into a kind of liminal space. And part of what makes it that, it isn't just the high ceilings and the seating the way that it is, and the gates and the same restaurants and the same coffee shops, which does have this feeling of where am I? It's also a shared understanding that everyone is in that space and everyone kind of knows what to do. Because being in an airport is a particular way of being. Time is different in an airport. People are different in an airport. The sense of purpose is different in an airport. And there's something we're all attuned to, because if we sit in any of the chairs looking out the window, we're watching people coming and people going, and we understand that we're part of this thing. And this is all a long way of saying, this is my understanding of temples. There's a tradition, there's a body of teachings called Nyoho. This is the kind of the body of teachings around how we cultivate the practice for others, how we make a practice space. We talk about food and clothing and shelter. When we talk about shelter, we're talking about temples. We're talking about how to build a temple. But the project isn't to build a special temple, one that has its own unique characteristics, one that makes you step inside and say, wow, I've never seen a temple just like this. It's actually the opposite. It's about how to build a temple that when you walk into it has that feeling of, oh, this is the temple. I've been here before. I know what this is. I'm in here in Sensoji every day. Every day. And that's a privilege, but it comes at a little bit of a cost, because for me it's very normal. The walls are normal. The smell is normal. So much so that when other people come here, they say, oh, it smells so good. Because the incense has permeated the walls. But I don't smell it. I don't I don't notice it anymore. But then I go to Indiana, to San Shinji, which is a temple in Bloomington, Indiana. And I walk in and I get that feeling of, oh, I know what this is. And it hits me. When I'm here, I'm going to stand like this. And when I talk, I'm going to talk like this. And I'm going to sit like this. Not because it's a rule, but because I'm in the temple now. Dogen refers to the house of the Buddhas, that we throw ourselves into the house of the Buddhas. That house has no shape. It has no size. It doesn't even have location. We go to one place and from the outside it looks like that. And we go to another place and it looks like this. And we step inside and we're there. From the outside, this temple looks like a garden shed. But from the inside, I know, because I'm looking at all of you, that this temple is the size of the world. And that when you turn on Zoom, it's not that you're looking at this place. It's this place is where you are. And this place isn't just sensoji. It's that when you turn on your screen, you're in the place. You're in that place that has been built over and over again for 2,600 years. And I struggle to find the right language for it because if I say you're here, it makes it sound like it's here and you're beaming in. But that's not it. It's that here is there. My hope in building these four walls was simply to help make a reminder of that so that we might turn on Zoom and have a bigger feeling of that, of I know where I am. I know where I am, and when I look at it, I know what it's for. And if I know what it's for, then I know why I'm here. In June, we'll do these ceremonies. And in a way, and I'll say more over the next months, it's a kind of, like so many things, a kind of consecration. It's a way of saying, this really is the thing we're talking about. And I'm glad we're doing that. But I hope we already know. I hope we know when we come together in this way where we are. I hope we know that we are practicing with each other, that we are holding each other up, that we are supported by others, not just the people we see, and I see you right now, but by the people we don't see. That we understand that when we hold space in this way, we're here. And in a way, we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before, and they're here. And in a way, there are people standing on our shoulders, and it looks like they're not here yet, but they're here too. And so it's not just that the temple doesn't have size and it doesn't have place, it also doesn't have time. We throw ourselves into the house of Buddhas and then we populate it with ourselves as Buddhas. And maybe we're the chicken and maybe we're the egg. But it makes this thing that we call a temple. That has been built and is being built and will continue to be built by us every day. And that's where I'll stop.